So, my name is Toby Barrera. I'm with Sunbelt Pools. I'm here going to do the training on and answer questions about your Defender system and your UV systems. Because we're a Neptune Benson rep, we are actually your representative and your point of contact for repair, service, any questions on the equipment that you might have that you need help with, including the VFDs, because they're the green guys. They're all under that umbrella. So, regenerative media filter, if you're familiar, basically no sand. There's not a backwash function. There is a change your perlite function. You have a window where you can see the flex tubes. That's the terminology they use for those guys. I've heard everything from tentacles to strings to, but flex tubes is the technical term. The product you want to use is perlite. If you want to use anything other than perlite, there is a list from Neptune Benson of what they will accept that does not affect warranty or performance. They're pretty specific on that. And I know Universal is not unfamiliar to regenerative media filters or most of this equipment that's in this room. This particular system has influent effluent gauges like you would have on any filter system. You do have isolation valves. That would be if you get a little bit of perlite blow-by, which will happen over time, and you'll start seeing it collecting in the tubes. What's nice about that is that you could actually isolate, or you could loosen up and blow these out if need be to get it out, or just replace the tube if it gets too crusty. The funny thing is these gauges will still read. Even if it's full of perlite, they'll just react slower. They're still pretty accurate, believe it or not. So you do have pressure transducers, influent effluent. The reason for those is you'll see that you have a pressure differential right here. Okay. There's also another pressure transducer on the manifold block down below, because this system is dependent on an air compressor to operate the pneumatic valves, bump cycle, effluent valve, pre-coat valve. So in a regenerative media system, you have what's called a pre-coat cycle. When you're starting this all up, what that does is it does a closed loop for approximately 10 minutes as to create the coating on the flex tubes. So the air compressor is over on the other side of the room. So basic function with these, this is a nice interactive panel. So in this system, you have your menu functions. This is able to be scheduled for bump cycles at a specific time of day. And you can do up to 4 bump cycles a day. You can program, okay? And so in that, you have your view. And in your view, you can see all the different things. And if you look, there's your bump schedule. This is the most common thing you see. Now, let's say you wanted to change this. Let's say I want to enable it. It's going to ask you for a password. It's 5 twos. Even in the manual, it tells you it's 5 twos. So once you touch the box, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, enter, okay. Now I can touch that, make it, little green. Now, anytime it's green, it means it enabled, but I don't have anything programmed, okay?
Right.
You have your time function over here, so once you start enabling all your days, you can then choose, my fat fingering this thing, you can touch the window. Now you can enter your time. We're not going to do this because I don't know if you guys want that or not. So, and then disable. So for right now, if you were to program this one, it's set to program 7 days a week. And again, the beauty of this is that if your bump schedule is different on a weekend, because you need a bump 2 times a day, you have the ability to, pick Monday through Friday, or you can do your Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's nice that you have those functions. Everything that I talk about is a guidance function for you. Everything refers back to the manufacturer's documentation about all your limits of how this should operate and everything like that, which I'll briefly touch on. And then obviously you have your own policies within the company of how you kind of handle the room. No big deal there. This manual is actually pretty good. And actually, believe it or not, in here you have a menu function. I'm going to, there it is. So if you wanted to try to look at this, the manual is actually in the computer.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And any documentation you want, if you want to get a hold of Thomas, we can send you all the PDF forms of that, and I'm sure that you'll probably submit them anyway in O&M. So if you want electronic copies of that, I'll give you a card. You can email me, and I can send you everything in electronics so you have a PDF. My whole service team, it's exactly what I do. They have all their stuff on PDFs on their phones.
Okay.
So it's just a nice thing to have where you can scroll through. So there are a lot of features on a regenerative media system that I could go through, but I don't think it would be beneficial for you to overwhelm a whole bunch of information. When it comes to the media changes and when it comes to bump cycles, the purpose of a bump cycle is to try to allow a lot of the heavier stuff that's coming into a pre-coat to drop to the bottom. It technically can stay at the bottom if it's really heavy, but it doesn't. But the idea is that when you do that, the heavier stuff stays towards the bottom of the flex tubes, and so you get a better filtration. So as this loads up, you'll start seeing this differential go up. Differential is one reason to do a media change, also the condition of what your pre-coat looks like. So if this starts getting, the perlite starts turning like dark chocolate brown, even though your differential might only be like 3 or 4 pounds, what typically we see is it goes up and then you bump and it drops back. It's probably not a bad idea to change it. Your biggest hurdle being an outdoor facility, especially a splash pad, is sunscreen, all those oils. Once that starts getting into the perlite, it actually you'll start seeing the perlite get wavy, stuff like that, where, hey, you know what, I probably would rather do a media change sooner than later, because as that gets worse, it gets through the perlite and gets on the flex tubes, and then you'll start seeing really bad waves, splotchy, bridging, and then at that point, your filtration isn't as effective as it would be. And so that's more of a function of beta load and how heavy it's going to be. So I see outdoor facilities that can change their perlite once a month. Some can go 6 weeks, and I know some that change it once a week. That really is just beta load related and what things look like. So that's just kind of the small things. You can pay attention to that. What it costs to throw a bag in here in your time is probably a lot cheaper than the end where you have to might do a chem clean or something like that, or do a full rinse out. And when it comes time for anything like that, those are options. We're happy to walk. You can call us. We'll tell you, yeah, here are your options. Here's what you can do. Here's how you can do it. You want us to help you, whatever it is. That's what we're here for. Sorry. This interactive setup is pretty nice from that aspect. Basically, you have a vacuum is how you suck your perlite in. This diagram will walk you through the procedure of once this is off, you're draining it, filling it, rinsing it, draining it again, making sure it's dry, and then from there you manipulate your valves in order to put this into a vacuum setup, get your perlite in. The most important thing on any regenerative media systems, no matter who it is that when you do a media change or you're going to drain any water out of this tank, is getting all the air out of the system. That is probably the most critical thing I can stress. You have two ways of the way you drain air out of the system. One is on the backside manifold, or here actually. This is how you're getting the air out of your tank. When you start up and then you're using your 3/4 to get the rest of the air out closer to your pre-coat valve, to your effluent valve. That is super important. At any point when you do a media change and you see air and you hear things that are weird, I always encourage everyone to stop, start over, and bleed air, just to be sure. Getting air in the system and having your pump cavitate or water hammer can be pretty detrimental to the equipment, not so much this, but your piping and all that other stuff. Things unfortunately can break. And obviously, we don't want any of that happening and anybody standing around when that happens. I mean, a bath is okay, but flying plastic is probably not the funnest thing. One of the biggest things I noticed is that this filter never gets removed inside of this vacuum and get knocked out. So I would say probably after about 2 to 3 media changes, I would check it to see how bad it's getting built up. Might not be a bad idea to have a spare, or just to remember to knock it out after every 2 or 3 media changes. It makes a big difference because you'll probably still get suction, but you'll notice after the 3rd one, it's like, wow, this really isn't going in. So, yeah, it's, comes off the bottom. It's like any shop vac. Usually online, if you Google this brand, Channel Lock, and this particular vacuum, you can find spare filters. That's what we recommend, to have one that you can just walk around and change and knock them on as you go. or just knock them out. That's probably the biggest thing. Your particular system, when you drain, you do have a waste pump. The biggest thing I can say about that is that when you run this waste pump, when you do your rinse cycle, it might not be a bad idea to actually do a little bit more water so you don't get any perlite buildup inside the balloon of your pump. That's just from experience on ones that we've set up, that we've seen that perlite build up in that balloon, and it just doesn't have the oomph anymore, because perlite, when it sits and it doesn't have water on it, kind of gets pretty hard and dry. Not concrete-like, but enough to affect the performance. Yes, absolutely. Just a small tip, might save you some trouble down the road. So that's really the only difference here when you do immediate changes. When you're doing your drainage, you have to activate that pump. Your pneumatic components of this system, obviously your effluent valve is up there, which that is a function of time. Your pre-coat valve is down on the suction side of your pump. That is what opens, and you have a throttle valve down there. When it comes to the maintenance of these pneumatic valves, if you're noticing a little more shaking down the road, you know, take a look at your valves, make sure things aren't sticking or moving smoothly. That could potentially require an adjustment down the road. It just depends. Most of these are set up pretty well. Things are pretty smooth. So, and there's manipulation points that we can do in the programming too to help the system on that. But typically with those, the biggest thing that we see that gets neglected is that air compressor. If that air compressor gets any water, even though you have a dryer, if the dryer can't keep up because that's never being checked and the water's being bled out, what it does is it dries out all the seals inside of those pneumatic valves, and actually will also dry out the seals and cause a little bit of oxidation inside of these solenoid valves, which can affect how they actually work. So that's one of the most common things that we see get neglected, is that air compressor, and making sure that the water gets drained out. You'll have a better idea that once you're operating, maybe put it on a weekly PM just to check it and see, and then from there you can adjust your PM. Some customers actually put automatic bleeds on that, like pump for like a second or two, just pop like maybe once a day. We don't recommend bleeding a ton off. If you bleed too much air and drop this down below 50 psi, it will shut it off. That's the threshold, 50 psi or less. And that's what that other transducer is for. Your average pressure coming in is right around 85 psi. You don't want to exceed 100, and we don't recommend going below 75, just from an operation standpoint. Seems to be a good threshold. Your exhaust valve up there, that's the only other common thing we see is you see that little white muffler get broke sometimes. If that white muffler breaks, you'll know, because it'll sound like a shotgun going off the road. It's loud. Without that, believe it or not, it is really loud. You'll know if it's failing. Again, stuff like this, you have questions or you need parts or anything like that, just reach out to us. Okay. And some of this stuff I'm going to direct you to the website. If you want to purchase this, whatever. So, in the end, you have your influent, effluent, you have your 1.5 inch, which is 2-function bleed and setting up your vacuum system, and then you have your 3/4 inch bleed at your highest point before you get to your effluent valve to get all the air out of your system. So, any questions?
Not right now.
Yeah. And again, I'll give you a card, but I'm always going to direct you like I do everyone else. If you can't get a hold of me or text me, call the main number and get to service.